One of America's foremost novelists, Joyce Carol Oates, has been writing since she was young and publishing since 1963. Some 26 novels, 19 collections of short stories, and 8 collections of poetry later, she continues to produce work that challenges and inspires her readers. Currently, she has 2 books out. One is a novel called Were the Mulvaneys, and one is a novella, which is called First Love. One deals with the fall from grace of a prosperous American family, that's the Mulvaneys. The other with a dark fantasy of adolescent infatuation, which is First Love. I'm pleased to have her here on this broadcast. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Now, let me just talk about this first. Well, first, why bring 2 out about the same time?
Oh, it was probably just coincidence.
Yeah. You know, I know you think that for someone to do what you do is natural for someone who's obsessed by writing. Having said that, there are some very good writers who watch you write and say, how does she do it? How is she so prolific?
It's really difficult to answer because in my own experience, I write with great frustration, and I do much revision. I'm writing over and over again. I think possibly I just spend more time at it than most normal people would spend.
Well, normal, what do you mean by normal?
Sane people. Well, I love writing.
So Joyce Carol Oates, by definition, if she does this much and this much well, is a little bit different than the rest of us.
Well, I'm not different from some writers in the past. Charles Dickens, for instance, was obviously very obsessed, and he loved to write. Shakespeare wrote rapidly and very well.
What is it about you that makes you work so hard, drive so much, be so compelled to put pen to paper?
Well, I suppose there is a kind of compulsion. I like to tell stories, and I'm very excited by the memoirist aspect of writing. Both those books, the long novel and the novella, are set in very specific places, to my mind, very vivid places. When my parents read my novels or stories, they always see in the background recognizable landscapes. The foreground might tend to be completely fictitious, but the background and the settings, the houses, often are real.
Is it all from upstate New York?
Well, most of it, much of it, because I'm based upon girlhood and childhood memories. But I love to populate real landscapes with somewhat fictitious people who themselves are maybe composites and a bit, imaginary.
But have you in your own mind 7 stories that you want to write, and you just have to get to them one at a time? I mean, are 7 good ideas that are floating around?
Probably more than 7. And when I finish with a novel, it's as if I'm assaulted on all sides by more ideas. So when I go running, which I love to do, or bicycling, I'm just bombarded with new ideas. When I'm actually working on something, I'm thinking about the form, because I'm really a formalist, and how it's set down, and how long the chapters are, and that sort of thing. So when I'm working on something, my mind is very concentrated, but when I'm done with a project, and I get all these ideas.
Okay, all to what end, though?
Telling stories?
Telling stories.
Well, I guess it's part of our human species, this creative impulse. We reach out to other people through language, other artists through paint or music, and it's part of the communal project, you could say, of our species. I don't think we really understand why human beings are creative.
You think that creative people are a little bit different from the rest of us, and a little bit
No, I don't think so. No, I think everyone's creative in different ways. There are women like my mother who are wonderful as homemakers. They've never created anything that you call art, but they're very creative, in domestic life and human relations. We're all very creative.
And the young Mike Tyson, whom you knew.
The young Mike Tyson.
The young Mike Tyson, whom you knew, was creative at his craft of boxing.
Creative is an interesting idea. Basically, I think what Mike was trying to do when he was a young boxer, I knew him when he was 19 and 20, he was trying to live out in real life the agenda of Customato, who was his trainer.
Sure, right.
And they had planned together what Mike would do. So I think that he was living in the flesh that which had begun in fantasy. And I don't think of him as a creative boxer in the way that Muhammad Ali had been.
How about Sugar Ray Robinson?
Well, Sugar Ray Robinson is superb, absolutely. And Sugar Ray Leonard, really wonderful boxers. Very clever, very shrewd. I don't think of Mike Tyson quite that way, particularly any longer.
Yeah. How do you explain what's happened to him?
What happened to Tyson? Well, I doubt that I would really know. I haven't seen him.
But
in so many years.
You've said once that it was more offensive to you. Help me. That's not exactly the word you said.
More surprising.
But more surprising that he would go into the ring and not be prepared when he lost to Buster Douglas.
Yes, I was
than
surprised.
it was that he would rape somebody.
Well, I got in a lot of trouble for saying that, and I said it in a kind of speculative way. You know, I didn't really want it to be engraved in marble. I was very surprised and actually stunned to see a boxer of his caliber and promise come into the ring, obviously not trained, not conditioned. He just came in the ring and he was knocked out very shortly afterward. I was stunned by that.
Stunned that he would allow himself that.
Yeah, and he lost to Buster Douglas.
That assault and that insult to himself.
Yeah, I was really surprised. Subsequently, I think I can't be surprised by anything in boxing.
Back to creativity before we talk about these two books. How much of it do you think is born? How much of it is something that you acquire?
Creativity?
Yes.
Oh, I think all children are creative. Everyone's born with a certain measure of creativity. It might be for scientific speculation, or it might be for exploring the world, or moving around and through time and space. But it should be encouraged by parents or by teachers or someone. I think it can be stifled and maybe smothered.
And yours was neither?
Well, mine was encouraged.
And what made you a writer?
I also like to draw, and I like music. Telling stories is just so interesting. I would draw. My first novels were on tablet paper. I couldn't write yet, so I scribbled, and then I drew pictures of cats. I've always specialized in cats and birds.
Why cats and birds?
Because, well, cats were around, domestic creatures, and chickens were on the farm. So
first thing Picasso drew was pigeons.
Well, he was obviously seeing pigeons, so I was seeing chickens.
And after his father saw him draw the pigeons, he stopped painting, and his father was a painter and said, "You're already better than I am."
Yeah, well, he was quite a genius, of course.
First Love is about Josie, right?
Yes.
And this 11-year-old, and her obsession and her what? How would you characterize what she's going through, her adolescent what?
Well, it's a Gothic tale. She's been, in a sense, bereft by her father. Well, her father has been left behind, and her mother is not wanting to play the role of mother. So she's a very isolated and vulnerable girl. She, too, is a fantasist, and some of what she's fantasizing may come out to be true, or it may, in fact, be simply a fantasy. But it is a Gothic tale, and it's set in a tradition of the Gothic tale, which often focuses upon an old house and the inheritance in some measure, some form from another generation.
It's also about, you're also writing about an abused, and why they don't run from it, and what is the compulsion of it.
That's right. Well, it's as if she's hypnotized. As I said, her mother doesn't want to play the role of mother anymore. She's very explicit about that. So the girl is very vulnerable and looking for love from some figure of authority, someone who would seem to be interested in her. And there's a strain of what I could only call female masochism, which is a kind of taboo subject, especially if you're a feminist. But that's in the novel, but then she comes through it. It's as if there's a kind of cycle that she runs through, and then she repudiates the man who has been abusing her, and so she's come through this cycle.
Where did the story come from? Just out of your head, something you wanted to write, or?
Well, where did it come from is a good question. I can't even answer that. I know where it's set. It's a very vivid setting to me. The river and the tall grasses and even the snake and the marshy land. To me, it's set in a place that I know. And the house is somewhat invented, but it's also a house that might be in a place like Hopewell, New Jersey, a small town. So to me, the setting's very real.
What comes first for you, character or setting?
Sometimes the setting is so exciting to me, a landscape, a house, certain kind of architecture. Sometimes the way the sky looks and the certain lighting and texture of the air, it's as if it generates a story. The story is generated from the atmosphere.
Let me talk about the Mulvaneys then. This is a story of a father, out of love, goes nuts and destroys everything around him. Yes?
Well, that's a part of the novel.
Well, tell me how would you characterize this story? It's about the destruction and deterioration of a family.
Well, the family
They all come apart.
but they come back together again.
Yeah, but they come apart as the central operative idea over.
No, I didn't think of it. I didn't think of it as a central idea. I saw it again as a cycle. Sometimes in families, even families that are very happy, something goes wrong. It could be a misunderstanding between two brothers, or somebody is slighted by somebody else and perceives an insult. And the family just starts going along this careening course and things go wrong. People don't speak to each other for 15 years. I've seen that happen, and I wanted to write about that. And then when one family member is removed from the context, the others come back and they're reconciled. I've seen that happen. So it was a story that seemed to me very American in many respects. So I wanted to write it.
And where the idea came from a setting, or from a story, or from a newspaper item, or from what?
Well, I wanted to write about a girl who is abused, and then she's repudiated by her father. And I wanted it to have, of course, a completely contemporary setting. It's rather like a ballad or a fairy tale. It's very much like a fairy tale where a king banishes his daughter for some reason that seems to us very ridiculous. But people do these things, and so I wanted to make the family come alive, and the animals. It's also a novel in which animals are very important.
What's the next? What are you writing next?
Well, at the moment, actually I'm working on a screenplay with Jean Moreau.
With Jean Moreau,
Yeah.
who's coming here in a week or two, I think.
Well, Jean is here right now.
She's here now.
She's here now.
Now, what's it about? What's the screenplay?
The screenplay is an adaptation of a novel of mine I wrote some years ago called Solstice. A very slender novel about two women who are friends. And Jean Moreau will direct it.
Yeah. And whose idea was this, to make it into a film?
Jean Moreau.
So she read it and wanted to make it into a film?
Yes, that's right. She has very specific ideas. She's a very interesting and, of course, enormously gifted, rather remarkable woman with a strong vision, strong will. And Merchant Ivory is the producer.
Right, right. Joyce Carol Oates, We Were the Mulvaneys, and First Love, a novella and a novel out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow night. See you then.